Hi everyone, you're watching 7th Circle Gaming. Today on the channel we're discussing the game WARNO, or Warning Order. And well, we'll get started here in just a second with full disclosure. Like we always say, pause the video now and read through that at your leisure. Or if you'd prefer not to, we'll move right on to the screenshots. The first one is what we would call the top level menu of the game, in which we see an options menu on the bottom right, and then continuing around solo play, multiplayer, mod center, and finishing up with the Armory. And the Armory is one of the places that the player is going to spend most of their, or a fair amount of their time in the game. And let's take a look at that now. On this screen, what we see is, well, what an Armory would look like. And there are a couple of things that we want to draw your attention to. And the first of which, we'll start on the bottom, is the clipboard that reads Battle Groups. This is now the menu where players will be given the option of creating their own custom battle groups or viewing the pre-generated battle groups. And on the left side of the screen, moving around, is where players have the option of selecting different types of unit to view. Players can then narrow down which type of unit they want to view by clicking on that nation's flag at the top of the screen. And for those that might not necessarily be familiar with it, yes, there are two German flags. One of them is East Germany, and the other one is West Germany. West Germany is the one that doesn't have the symbol in the middle, by the way. And moving right along, on the right side of the screen is the right center of the screen is what's supposed to look like some kind of a quick reference card or a field manual. And on this is where all of the statistics about the unit are displayed. In this case, it is a parachuting MP, or military police unit. And on this little unit card, what we see is what type of weapons the unit is equipped with, what their accuracy and various other stats are. Would like to point out at this point that in this game, some units have the ability to select their own transport vehicle, whether they want, for example, a Humvee or an M113, or whatever flavor of national vehicle. But that is something else that players are going to be shown statistics for and given options to choose. And since we're going to be talking, eventually players will have to take those battle groups into battle, let's show you very quickly here what that battle screen is going to look like. There's a couple of points that really we want to highlight. The top menu, where the little gold number is, that's the player ticket count, and then how many tickets or points they've accrued. Just to the left of that, on the same menu bar, is where the reinforcements are called in, and then their point value is subtracted from the number in gold. Pretty reasonable. The rest of the menus are pretty minimalist. There's buttons on the bottom right for executing advanced commands, if players would prefer not to use the hotkeys. But yes, mousing over that will show what the hotkey is and give a brief description of what that command means. So, since that's all there is to say about the menus, we do just, before we move on and start compiling into scores, we will just point out that everything in the game looks fairly realistic. We're not seeing any space aliens or monsters on this screen. It all looks like a reasonable part of the world in any country, any state, any city, or any province. So all to the good there. And now, let's start compiling into scores. So, in Immersion, where we ask the question, what is the game going to do to get players invested into the game world? The game has earned a 7 out of 15, and it's going to be coming from the presentation. The game world is presented from an isometric perspective. It can be zoomed into what we could call a third-person perspective, but isometric perspective is where players are probably going to be spending the majority of their time. The units are realistically modeled, and the world itself is, as we saw, fairly relatable and realistic. One of the things that the game is also going to use is challenge. Each engagement is fairly fast-paced and tactical challenge. There's also a strategic puzzle, but that's really going to be coming from creating that battle group and analyzing the statistics attached to each unit, and deciding whether or not that unit is optimal or suboptimal or whatever else. Now, we could say that the game attempts to use audio to get players invested into the game world, but frankly, from all points in the game, the audio really isn't as impactful as simply the pace of the combat. So, let's now talk a little about difficulty. Well, difficulty, the game has earned a 4 out of 15. The user interface varies between reasonable and fairly complicated. There are multiple commands to learn, or advanced commands that could be to the player's advantage to understand, or it could be to their detriment if they don't understand those. It should be added that in the skirmish mode, at least, there are a substantial amount of difficulty options, ranging from very easy to near impossible. We would also add that there are, in the options menu, some options that will impact difficulty, so it might be to the player's advantage to scan through the difficulty settings, or the options menu. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question. Lasting appeal. What's going to keep players invested into the game over the long term? The game is at present actively under development, today being of course the 26th of September 2022. There is present no DLC. There are additional factions being added to the game and additional units. The game does permit mods. However, at present, it does seem like those mods are mostly community patches or unit tweaks. There are, in addition, several factions and different units to choose from and experiment with. There are multiple maps to play skirmish modes on, or to play skirmish battles or multiplayer battles on, but at present, it's really going to just be that skirmish battle, if the player is going to be playing solo. So not a lot of variety. And so, with all that said, the game has earned a 5 out of 15 for lasting appeal. And where does that leave the game overall? Well, and that's going to be answered by our next screen here. Overall score. The game has earned an average score of 5.3 out of 15. At present, the game only has skirmish gameplay or multiplayer. The only gameplay that players are going to be seeing is infantry, anti-aircraft gameplay, no ships, or naval combat, in other words. There are a significant amount of statistics to learn about each unit. We could say that the game is likely to have niche appeal. with that, that's where we take off the objectivity hat and put the subjective hat on. So the next couple of statements should be taken with grains of salt and suspicion, whatever else. Pick your metaphor, your analogy. Is the game more approachable to new players, or a better entry point for the series than Wargame Red Dragon or the Steel Division series? In our highly subjective opinion, that might not be the case, other than the fact that the units represented are more recent and more familiar to a wider variety of players than some of the older units. It has been said that the game is an attempt to rationalize the systems of Wargame Red Dragon and Steel Division. That's going to be up to the player to decide whether that's what they're really looking for or not. And I know the next statement here is very highly subjective and likely to be charged. It does seem like the game is more iterative than revolutionary, not adding anything new and not really taking a lot away. So, just before we end, we will say that Wargame, as far as comparing with other games, and I know we don't usually do that on this channel, but previous games in the series have seemed to devolve into basically being about the multiplayer community, and it's certainly possible that this will go the same way, where the campaign mode is little played. So that's something to consider before purchasing the game. It might come down to knowing whether or not one's friends or associates also play, whether they driving their decision to purchase or not. So, moving on very quickly before we dig too deep of a hole, we'll say that's all we have to say about WARNO. Congratulations, you've reached the end of the video. You're very welcome to express your opinions in the comments section below. If you've got a game that you'd really like to see on the channel, put that down below too. And from 7th Circle Gaming, good